This podcast is brought to you by Most Valuable Podcasts, leading the league in podcasting entertainment.
What's up, real MVPs? Ricky Widmer here, along with the one, the only, Brandon Swanson.
Hey.
And we are back coming at you with the Primetime Podcast right here on Most Valuable Podcast, your one-stop shop for, I say all of college sports, but let's be honest, we usually dive into college basketball and college football. Have not touched college volleyball yet. Haven't looked at college baseball, college softball, a little bit of college badminton. Haven't dove into any of those. Just basketball and football are our main two. And today's a big one, Brandon, because last week we had the NBA big board. And this week we got another big board, this time on the foosball side of things.
I'm going to be big boarded out. I'm going to be big boarded out.
Brandon's like, I'm going to be big boarded out. When's our next? I'm actually going to look at that right now. Pull up our schedule. Our next big board after this one will be NFL. We don't have one until February 4th, so we get a lengthy time off with that. Our next NBA big board is the end of December. So end of December, and then with that one, we get 2 months off because the third one for that one is at the end of February. So it's usually 2 back-to-back, and then we get that break for each one. So this one, NFL, how we do it is, if you're new, we go 1 through 25. We start with 25 through 16, kind of talk about some things there. Go 16, what would that be? Then 15 through 6, talk about some things there. Then we go with our top 5. Before we get into everything, though, quick housekeeping. Make sure to check out patreon.com/mostvaluablepodcast. That's where you can help support us. Make sure that we can do everything that we love doing for you guys each and every week, and we would not be able to without the help of our patrons, so we thank them each and every podcast. Also, make sure to get yourself an MVP t-shirt. Another way to help support us, that is either in our shop down below in the description or at mostvaluablepodcast.com, where you can catch MVP each and every day. And then last but not least, please go over to iTunes and Apple Podcasts. I only do it for the Primetime Podcast. I don't do it for Rick and Johnny. I don't do it for the Onside Kick. Do you think we got any new rates this week, Brandon?
I'm going to go with no again.
Let's see. For the Primetime Podcast, I'm going to pull it up right here. Oh, we did.
We did.
We got a new one.
Is it good or bad?
This one is from... This would be Tutu Boyvier. These guys are awesome. Gave us a 5-star rating. He said, these guys do a great job talking basketball and football. It's hard to find good college basketball coverage, but these guys are awesome. Loving the NBA big boards with a basketball emoji. So you can tell he did it on the phone. So thank you to Tutu Boy. So it's Tutu, like Tutu, boy, and then Vier. Would that Boyvier? Boyvier? Is that how you... Tutu Boyvier. That's basically how I'm going to say it. And basically, thank you for... That was from Wednesday that he did that. So right
Very
after
nice.
we put out our NBA Big Board #1. Thank you for that rating. And you can rate the Primetime Podcast too on Apple Podcasts and iTunes. But Brandon, let's go ahead and just dive right into this big board. It's been about, let's say, 4 minutes of me rambling on, and people are like, guys, get to the big board. We want to know who's there and who you're going to talk about. So what we'll do is 25 through 16. I'll have you start with 25. Give us your first section of your NFL Big Board 2.0.
Ricky, I'd be happy to. So to start things off, at 25, I've got the wide receiver from Buffalo, Anthony Johnson. At 24, Raekwon Davis, the defensive lineman from Alabama. At 23, Ja'Kai Polite, Ja'Kai.
Ja'Kai Polite.
Yeah, I got that right. The linebacker from Florida. At number 22, Brian Burns, the linebacker / defensive end from Florida State. At 21, Jeffrey Simmons, the defensive tackle from Mississippi State. At number 20, Devin Bush, the linebacker from Michigan. At 19, Julian Love, the cornerback from Notre Dame. At 18, Deontay Thompson, the safety from Alabama. At 17, the wide receiver from Ole Miss, A.J. Brown. And at 16, David Montgomery, the running back from Iowa State.
Well, and then we'll dive right into mine. At number 25, N'Keal Harry, the wide receiver from Herm Edwards, Arizona State Sun Devils. Then number 24, Noah Fant, the tight end from the Iowa Hawkeyes. He's actually fully declared, I believe, said he's going to the NFL draft, not staying with the Iowa Hawkeyes. Then I got Brian Burns, the edge rusher out of Florida State. Then Montez Sweat, one of my big fallers this time around, the defensive end from Mississippi State. Then Deontay Thompson, the safety from Alabama, Roll Tide. Then a guy that might not like Thompson too much, and that is Derek Brown, the defensive tackle from the Auburn War Eagle Tigers. Then at number 19, Julian Love, the cornerback from the playoff-bound Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Then at 18, Jeffrey Simmons, defensive tackle and teammate to Montez Sweat at Mississippi State. Then at 17, my most loved name in this year's NFL draft, Marquise Hollywood Brown, the wide receiver from Oklahoma. He is also playoff-bound, and then also playoff-bound as well. The first Clemson Tiger on my big board, Christian Wilkins, the defensive tackle, like I've already said, from the Clemson Tigers. And Brandon, the first thing I want to hit in this first part of our big board was, number one is the wide receivers, because a lot of these wide receivers have fallen for us within this range. There's no wide receiver that's going to be like that number one, number two, that Amari Cooper type, that Justin Blackmon, when we were putting those guys in like the top 5, the top 10. A lot of these wide receivers are 16 through 25. The ones that I have, obviously, Hollywood Brown, N'Keal Harry. You went with Anthony Johnson, A.J. Brown in yours. What is your thought right now, after the regular season is over, before we enter bowl season, about this wide receiver group? Because this might be one where we see guys, I'm going to compare it to like a DJ Moore, where it's like, could they be bottom of the first round guys? Yes, but I wouldn't be surprised if only one of them go in the bottom of the first round and the rest are like early day 2 guys for round number 2.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely what I'm thinking. Well, I know for me, my guys, A.J. Brown and Anthony Johnson, they've fallen, but they haven't fallen out of my top 25, and it's because I think that there's still a lot that they showed this year. There's a lot of good things that they did. There's what you can see is from their seasons in the past, they've been able to build on that. They've been able to still continue to produce for their teams. That's why I think that definitely this is one of those situations where they could be an end of the first round into the second round type of thing. We're not talking, all the way in the third, the fourth, or anything like that. Now maybe they do because of other things that they need, but I still think at the same time, some of these wide receivers have proven to be very good talents and very good playmakers on their respective teams.
And for me, the kind of, I've got one that I'm super excited for. Obviously, he's the highest receiver on mine, Marquise Hollywood Brown, because this is a kid, every time that, like, I get that he's sub 6 foot, so he's not going to be like that wide receiver where it's like, throw it up, let him go get it. But this is a kid for me where every time I watch him play, and it could be also that he's playing with a Heisman level quarterback in Kyler Murray, and it could also be because he's in a great offense that fits him in Lincoln Riley's OU offense. But I look at this guy and I go, you know what? He's a guy that's got the acceleration, the burst, the speed, where it's basically like fly routes. If he can outrun the corner, he is going to outrun that corner and get you a huge gain. If you got a quarterback that can huck it and chuck it in the NFL, he's going to go ahead and go get it. The guy that I'm questioning is the guy that's number one for the wide receivers out of you, and that's A.J. Brown. Not necessarily of a like, oh, can he be at the next level? Because I think he can. The thing I think that kind of puts a negative on A.J. Brown to me, and this is also like some of the other guys that I like, because all of this is who you like, who you don't like too. And like, you look at Mel Kiper, you look at Todd McShay, you look at the other big boards, and a lot of the thing that you got to take in with a small grain of salt to me is their production in college, where you'll see some where it's like, oh, this guy, I've got him lower because his production was less. And I think for me, that's my problem with A.J. Brown is he's 6'1", 225. He's got the skills to be a wide receiver at the next level. He can be an effective route runner at the next level. But should his production this year, I'm going to say mainly because Ole Miss wasn't that great of a team and he didn't have Shea Patterson throwing to him this year, should we look at that with just like a little grain of salt, or should that be like, you know what? We're going to take that into consideration this year for why he's lower than many of us had him before the season started.
Well, in 2017, Ricky, he had 75 catches for over 1,200 yards and 11 touchdowns. Mm-hmm. In 2018, he upped his catch total to 85. He upped his receiving yards total to over 1,300. The only place he lowered was in touchdowns with 6, and his average per catch. Mm-hmm. It was 16.7 in 17, 15.5 in 18. A.J. Brown has still been a quality talent. Mm-hmm. A.J. Brown, without him over there, Ole Miss is worse than 5 and 7. Mm-hmm. And no, I think that if you look at it, you say if Shea Patterson's there, this guy had a chance for 100 catches, 1,500 yards. Maybe come close to the 11 touchdowns again. Mm-hmm. This is a good player. This is a guy who went up in a lot of categories this year. He's someone who I think certainly will be one of the best wide receivers looked at in this upcoming draft. And there's always teams that need wide receivers. The Jets would be one of them. They have nothing. A.J. Brown, I think, could be a perfect fit for a team. Tough receiver, plays hard, can go up and really point the football. I think that he's a guy who will not be going away. Mm-hmm. I don't think.
And I know for me, and I pulled up the other stats for the other two wide receivers as well with the Harry and Hollywood Brown. Most of them they're first off all over 1,000-yard receivers. But the biggest kind of difference between them, and this is, of course, I'm going to relate this like what we did to the Duke guys in the NBA big board with splitting some hairs here, where Hollywood Brown was just over 1,300 yards right now, 17.6 yards per catch, 10 TDs. Then you've got Harry, who's just over 1,000 yards, so about 300 yards less than the other two, but he's got 14.9 on his average per catch, 9 touchdowns. And then you look at A.J. Brown, where this year, like you said, he's in that 1,300-yard range, like Hollywood Brown. He's more towards the N'Keal Harris at 15.5 per average. I think it's a touchdown number. That 6 touchdown number is the only thing that kind of, looking at the stats, is a little bit of a negative compared to the other two.
But it's not significant. It's not that significant.
But I would put in there, and this is the argument that I would say, especially if you're putting in Marquise Brown to A.J. Brown, A.J. Brown to Marquise Brown, is one has a Heisman-level quarterback, the other one does not. And if this Ole Miss team still had Shea Patterson, like you said, he'd probably be at that 11 touchdown mark that he was at last year. Do you think any of these guys, before we move on to the last guy, I want to mention this one, do you think any of these guys makes a push either via the combine or via individual workouts? Do they push that 15 wall where it's like, you know what, I've been a 16 to 25 guy on these big boards. I'm pushing it through, and I'm a top 15 guy on the big board.
Just out of any of the wide receivers?
Any of the 4 that we talked about. And you can even throw in Anthony Johnson, which would be the 4.
Well, I think that probably any of the wide receivers that we mentioned could possibly make that push, mm-hmm. because we have them on our big board for a reason at this point. And in this point, during now getting to be the off season for some of the players, a lot of the players,
and they don't play bowl games.
Yeah. But I think a guy like an Anthony Johnson could, I don't want to say come out of nowhere, but that's kind of where he came from last year. kind of came out of nowhere, had this great season. Tried to follow it up again this year. The things were a bit lower. He didn't have quite the same season as he did last season, but I think there's still a lot of good talent with this player of Anthony Johnson, and I know that you obviously are huge on your Hollywood Brown guy. So
it could be a lot of hype, but I'll be honest, I love him.
I think that what do we see a lot of the times, Ricky, when we get to the combine? There's always that one or two players that they weren't even getting a ton of hype. They weren't doing this, they weren't doing that, and then all of a sudden, boom!
Rocket.
They just they come out of nowhere. They have great workouts. They get along and speak well with the different coaches and all the other people that are there. I think that you just have to be on your. We just have to be on our toes for whoever that person's going to be.
Here's a guy I want to move into is from offense to defense, Devin Bush. Linebacker, Michigan. He's a guy who's 5'11", 233. The reason why I want to bring him up, because it looks like both you and I, both you and I are kind of tempering expectations right now, where I have him obviously in my top 15 somewhere. You have him in this range at 20. The main reason why I wanted to talk about him, though, and this is bringing in Mel Kiper a little bit into this discussion, is do you know exactly did you look at all where Mel Kiper had Devin Bush ranked on his latest big board?
No, I have no idea.
Number 7. To me, right now, like I said, we're tempering expectations a little bit. Devin Bush is a guy who is right now, I believe, right now, he's listed as a playmaker. He's a guy that can get all over the field. This year, 79 tackles, 5 sacks. I'll ask you this, is where we're right now, the tempering expectations, the right spot for Bush, or should we be buying in on him like it seems like Mel? Because there's always that one guy, let's be honest. There's always that one guy where one of us falls in love with him, and on our personal big board, you look at it and go, I don't know, Ricky. That guy might be a little bit too high, but I fall in love with him. You have guys that are the same. Is this a situation where we're kind of underrating Devin Bush, or is Mel Kiper just falling in love with Devin Bush, and that's why he's a top 10 talent in his big board?
So where I'm at right now on him is Devin Bush is a guy who plays with a great level of energy, great toughness. The guy hits hard. If you get hit by him, for you and I, it's going to be tough to get up. And I think that's a huge thing. He's just got great physical power. But I think this is also an area where Mel Kiper has just fallen in love with him. And I say that because you look at his stats from last year to this year. His tackles significantly down. He had a total tackles up near 100 last year. This year, around 70. He was down in tackles for a loss, down in sacks. Again, not by huge numbers. Tackles down in passes defended. Of course, that doesn't mean that you're bad. I mean, like we were just talking with A.J. Brown. He was down. He was up in yards, up in catches, down in touchdowns. But I'm still saying he's not a bad player. And I'm not certainly saying that Devin Bush is a bad player, but I also feel as though there are other guys that we'll get to later on our big board here that are better talents than he is, which is why I've got him at this point and at this level in my big board. I just think that maybe there's something else that Mel Kiper has watched that maybe I haven't, that you haven't, that don't quite have him at that point yet. Maybe he's seeing something else, or maybe again it's one of those guys like you and I are with certain players, like everyone is with certain players, that you just go, love this guy. He's staying here, and then you put him at a pretty generous spot to begin with, and then you move him up the draft board from there, or the top 25 big board from there. So that could possibly be one of those situations, but I'm not sure. Only time will tell.
I got a question for you.
Sure.
I'm going to do a little blind resume with you.
Oh, I hate you.
They're both Michigan players. That's your hint. So, number 1, I'm only giving you a year. So, number 1 was also a linebacker. had 46 solo tackles, 20 assisted tackles, 66 tackles overall.
Say this again. Say this again.
46 solo tackles, 20 assisted tackles, 66 tackles overall. 13 tackles for loss, 3 sacks. Player 2. They're both juniors, by the way. 41 solo tackles, 25 assisted tackles, 66 tackles overall. He had 4.5 sacks, 8.5 tackles for loss. Do you want to know who the 2 players were?
Second one's Devin Bush.
Devin Bush.
And what were the tackles for a loss on the first player?
Tackles for loss, 13.
I'm going with the first player.
The first player, Jabril Peppers.
Yeah.
And that is, when I look at the size of Devin Bush, maybe it's the Michigan thing that plays into it. I right now see a Jabril Peppers type of player where, think about where Jabril Peppers was drafted to. He wasn't a guy that was top of the draft. He was a later first-round pick. That's what I see right now. Now, as I dissect the film during this draft process, we see the combine, we see personal workouts. Things may change, but right now, that is what I see. A guy who's 5'11". At 222, he's about 10 pounds bigger than what Jabril is. And I'm not saying they're the exact player, but like when I look at his size, I look at the position he plays. Now, Jabril was a kind of hybrid player. He was. You cannot say that any other way. Yes. Yeah, he was that star where it's that safety linebacker. Hey, I'm a safety. I'm going to come back. That's why he had an interception to his total that year. But he was also a safety to, hey, I'm going to come up and be that linebacker type of player also, where I think, with me personally, Devin Bush is going to be more of that, I am a linebacker, I am not a safety, like Jabril Peppers. But I look at the size and I go, if you're going to play him at the line like a linebacker, it's going to kind of be like Jabril Peppers because they are similar in size. And their stats in college, their junior year, their last year, are eerily similar.
You're right. And really the only thing where you see that Devin Bush has gone down this year is his assisted tackles. He was only down 3 solo tackles, but I guess you just want to see him be in on more plays. That's what I'm saying. Not on the field, but be in more plays in terms of what's happening in the action around the ball where you can be there. I'm not talking go into the secondary and get the guy there, but that's what I'm saying. That's where I'm just not quite as sold as a guy like Mel Kiper is, or clearly even as high as you might be on him in terms of this big board. But there is room to possibly still get up there. There's guys that we haven't even talked about that there's room to get into the big board. It's all about also now what is happening from here on out and what happens in the bowl games that I just love. What happens in the offseason, what happens at the combine, what happens with all of that. This is just a small piece. It's the second one, but it's just a small piece.
Well, and also, and this is the last thing I'll say, is the thing that might affect Devin Bush in this draft more so than any other draft that we've seen since the Clowney draft is what I'm thinking of. Because this draft class is so defensively heavy, we are going to, if you're looking for a linebacker, you're going to say, all right, do we go with Devin Bush? Do we go with Josh Allen? Do we go with the Devin White? There are multiple guys. Oh, do we go with Brian Burns? There are multiple guys in this draft class that you're going to split hairs against. And I know us outside of the big board, we're most likely going to have a topic at one point where we take Josh Allen and Devin Bush and put them 1v1 versus, all right, we're comparing these two prospects, or like a Devin Bush and a Devin White, and kind of look at them, because that's a lot of what this is too, is do you like Josh Allen more than this one? Do you like Devin White more than this one? And where do you have them personally ranked? Any final thoughts on anything we didn't have planned to talk about before we move into 6 through 15?
I'm good.
This is where you guys come in. Let us know what you guys think down below in that comment section. Let us know, what do you think of our big board? What are some guys we didn't touch? What do you think of the guys we did touch down below in that comment section?